Good morning, everyone. I am Matt Ewalt, Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism at the Tribune. Welcome to those joining us in person here in Austin and those joining us online for our conversation titled Tech and the Texas Lege, Should Texas Invest in Quantum Computing? The first in our three-part series looking at emerging technologies and how Texas is preparing for the future economy. Our program will run an hour today with 45 minutes of moderated conversation and 15 minutes of Q&A so that we can get to as many questions as possible. We'll be doing all of our Q&A through our Q&A portal at texastribune.org/ask. You'll find signage in the back of the room here in our studio with the URL and a QR code to make it easy for everyone. And we do have some note cards if you'd prefer to write your question down for us. We want to thank all those around the state and here in Austin who make the journalism of the Tribune, including events like this, possible by becoming Texas Tribune members. I see a few members here in our in-person audience. To learn more and to become a member, visit texastribune.org/support. This morning, we announced the dates for our 15th Texas Tribune Festival, November 13th through 15th, here in downtown Austin. TribFest isn't just another political event. It's where big ideas meet real action. As an attendee, you'll join conversations shaping the future of education, the economy, healthcare, energy, technology, public safety, culture and the arts, and much more, with those driving decisions in Texas and across the nation. Tickets go on sale this spring. And just a quick note on some upcoming Tribune events. The second in our Tech and the Texas Lege series focused on blockchain technology will be here in 919 on Tuesday, March 4th. More info on this event will be available on our events page this week, where you can RSVP. And next Wednesday, the Tribune will be in Denton for a conversation about the impact of HB 8, the state's new community college funding law a year after its passage. What impact are community college administrators seeing on enrollment and academic outcomes? And is the legislation changing the narrative about the importance of higher education for today's workforce needs? And last, on March 5th in Houston, we'll hold a day-long symposium titled A Blueprint for Texas Cities: Growth, Challenges, and Opportunities, timed with the recent publication of the Texas Metropolitan Blueprint, which lays out a 5-year policy agenda to ensure the long-term prosperity for the state's 26 metropolitan areas, home to 90% of the Texas population. You can learn more about these and other events around the state at texastribune.org/events. Now let's get to today's program. I first want to mention that Jay Boisseau, CEO of Vizias, is unable to join us this morning. He's under the weather, but we appreciate the conversations we've had with Jay leading up to today's program. Philip Farah is VP of Sales, Industries, and Strategic Partnerships at IonQ and is responsible for developing IonQ's strategic partnerships with a focus on revenue growth and strengthening IonQ's position at the center of the quantum computing ecosystem. And William Hurley, more commonly known as whurley, is founder and CEO of Strangeworks, an Eisenhower Fellow, a senior member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, the first ambassador to CERN and Society, and the co-author of Quantum Computing for Babies and Quantum Computing for Dummies. We have some copies of Quantum Computing for Babies here in the studio. And our moderator is Matthew Watkins, who began his duties as the Texas Tribune's editor-in-chief this past September and has been with the Tribune in various leadership roles since 2015. I thank our panelists for joining us today, and I turn the program over to Matthew.
All right, thank you, Matt, and thank you both for being here. I'll start off by being a little bit vulnerable and acknowledging that this is, we're touching on a very complicated and challenging topic that's a little bit outside of my normal expertise. And I think that that's probably a good thing, right? Because I think a lot of people in, well, we can't see it from here, but the building right down there where decisions might need to be made about whether and how the state invests in this are probably in the same position that I am. So my hope for this conversation is I can sort of be the representative, the vessel for that crowd. And I think we have two great people here to help kind of walk us through this. But I want to sort of break this conversation down into kind of three different parts. First, the sort of just introduction to quantum computing. What does this mean? What is its potential? Why is this something that we need to be talking about in this state right now? And then two, what kind of potential is there for Texas to invest in this, to have this industry in our state? And then three, what should we be thinking about preparing this state for a quantum world, whether those computers are being built or housed here or not? But let's start off with just the very simple question of what is quantum computing? Hurley, you as was mentioned, wrote the book Quantum Computing for Dummies. So I feel like you're a good person to sort of, give us an introduction to this question. Give us just your quick, brief intro of what this technology is and what it means.
So it's really easy. 1959, here in Texas, Texas Instruments, the integrated circuit was invented, right? That led to all of the compute that we have today, from your iPhone, the greatest supercomputer. It's all based on transistors, right? Electrical signals. So quantum computing is the ability to take atomic particles and either cool them down or trap them with lasers and use them to calculate. And the big difference is that if I have 4 bits, like in that transistor world, I have 16 outcomes and I can be in one of those outcomes at the same time. With a quantum computer, I can be in all 16 outcomes at the same time. And it scales differently as well. If I go from 4 to 5, I go from 16 to 25. However, if I go from 4 qubits to 5 qubits, I have 2 to the n the number of bits. So it's a completely new computing infrastructure. It's revolutionary in both the physics behind it and its ability to change everything in our lives. And so since Texas led by creating the original transistor, integrated circuit, I think we should be leading in taking quantum computing to heart in not just all of our universities, but in all of our government infrastructural support systems for that. It's super, super important. It's a transformational technology.
Okay, very good. And your company, Philip, is involved in developing this technology, building it. Give us a little bit of sense of what IonQ is working on in this field.
Yeah, thank you. So IonQ is working on creating the best quantum computers that can solve the most pressing problems that humanity has. And as Hurley mentioned, because of the ability of quantum computers to explore a very large number of possibilities at the same time, you see areas such as optimization, where you're trying to choose one path among many, many others. Areas such as cybersecurity, where you're trying to identify vulnerabilities and perhaps also ways to open and crack codes among multiple options. Areas in health and life sciences, where you're trying to choose out of the 8 billion compounds that are potentially available to create drugs, which 2,000 you're going to be able to test physically this year, because that's your limit. And so anytime you're looking at a very large potential of a number of options and you're trying to choose, quantum computers do really well. And we are pushing the limits of the type of machines and that you can use today to start solving these problems.
So basically the idea here is, right, we talk about kind of the growth of, I guess what we can say is traditional computers, right? And they have, followed Moore's law of they will get faster and you'll be able to more powerful over a period of time in somewhat of a linear growth. I mean, the science, the physics that allows us to happen, I think, are hard for a lot of us to sort of wrap our heads around. But what we're really talking about is, instead of that, traditional growth that we've seen since the transistor was invented, we're talking about kind of exponential growth in the power of what computers are able to process and do in the speed that they're doing. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's really important to note that there's kind of an opposite thing that not enough people talk about, which is those transistors keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And as they get smaller and smaller, the laws of quantum mechanics kind of come in. So there is theoretically a limit to how small those can get. And so that entire spectrum kind of breaks down, right? So it doesn't, every couple of years, it's not, smaller and faster and better. And so, this is, I mean, think about it. While we've advanced it quite far, we're still using 1959 technology in a way to solve all the world's problems. And so when you think about the, quantum computers coming into, general purpose and mass scale, you're talking about a revolution bigger than the internet or AI or any of these things. I mean, it's tremendous. It's literally changing the entire substrate that we use to solve the world's problems. And Philip mentioned some great ones. I mean, you talk about, we have customers at Strangeworks that are working on peptide discovery, right? So you're trying to figure out which amino acids can go in what chain. He talked about, how do you put that together? It's like only certain ones go certain together. It's massively complex problems. And so when you think of the world's problems today, whether that be drug discovery or better energy production or whatever it could be, all things very key to the state, right? We have big industries in all of these areas. That's why quantum computing is so important, is because this unlocks a completely new capability, a completely new area of compute to all of those businesses in the state that can take advantage of that. And, he mentioned cybersecurity. We have the cybersecurity, heads down in San Antonio, right? So everything Philip mentioned is a vital part of the Texas economy that could be dramatically affected either in a good way if we're on top of the quantum computing, or in a very negative way if we're not. Because the other thing about this compute is, once it happens, the people have prepared, the people that have been, gearing up for it, making sure the universities have the right programs, making sure the businesses have the right access, they're going to accelerate at a speed we haven't seen before. So think about Barnes and Noble thinking, we've got plenty of stores on every corner. We don't need to have an internet website, in the early 90s, right? Imagine that to a level that you can't really process.
And maybe to add a little bit to what Hurley has said in terms of kind of numbers, Moore's law, you double every 2 years your compute capacity. And as Hurley has said, we're arriving to a plateau. Many of these technologies, like organisms, go through rapid growth, and then they go through a period of plateau and eventually decay. Today, quantum is at the rapid growth. If you consider how quickly the quantum computers are doubling in capacity, and I was doing some math yesterday, according to our projections and roadmap, we're going to double every 5 days. It doesn't mean that there will be a new system every 5 days, but as a new system comes in and you compute the difference between the one before, you would have doubled every 5 days. The next generation will double every day. And so compare this to not being able to double your capacity every 2 years. So this is where it's coming. And why is this important? Texas is investing billions of dollars in the semiconductor industry, which is great. Think about the next generation that's coming after. And if we are placing all of our eggs, like shooting where the duck is here, we should also look where the duck is going as we aim. So I think quantum is an important next wave, and these waves are becoming closer and closer. It took, 36 years to get 50 million people to use TV. It took 6 months to get the same number to use Twitter. It took something in between for the adoption of cell phones, much closer to Twitter in years, not in decades. So these waves are getting closer, and the implication is that if you're not ahead of the wave coming, trying to catch it afterwards, you lose a big portion of the opportunity, and we'll talk about this more, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I still want to sort of drill into the sort of practicality of this, because I think it's an important thing to try to understand. As I've sort of read a little bit about this, there's different industries and areas that come up where this could be particularly impactful. Because one of the things here is, right, like I don't need. I mean, the phone in my pocket has a pretty powerful computer. It does a lot of what I need it to do. I'm not necessarily needing a quantum computer to, check Twitter or stream video or a lot of the things that we're practically doing. But people point to things like drug discovery, finance, energy, aerospace technology. I wonder if one of you could sort of pick an area and help me understand in that area how people kind of envision quantum changing the game.
Well, I can give you a real world example. So can't name the customers, but you take our one of our larger pharma customers is doing peptide design. They were able to reduce the cost of that program by 95% while increasing the performance of it by 93x. And that was in the first run using today's quantum computers, which, as Philip said, they're growing fast, but they're still kind of in their early days, right? And that's a huge impact today, right now. I mean, 95% of the cost out of a drug discovery program is huge. They're expensive. Improving that performance, and they've had peptides bond in the lab. So that's a real world today example, right?
And my understanding, particularly in the drug discovery, is that a lot of the work being done in drug discovery is through sort of simulations, chemistry simulations and things like that. And essentially what quantum computing would do would allow those simulations to explore a lot of more different possibilities at once. Am I saying that correctly?
You can do that, but also when it comes to simulations like digital twins, the amount of memory it would take to do like molecular simulation is like ridiculous on a classical computer. But if you're using, atoms and electrons to simulate atoms and electrons, right? It's a more one-to-one match. So there are some very big advantages into doing that. I think, what you're looking for is impact, right? Like, where does it make a big difference? We will not cure cancer with the computers we have now. Right? It is an intractable problem for that infrastructure, meaning that, it's not that the classical computers couldn't do it. It just might take it a few 100,000 years or something, right? And so when you look at the things that are affecting society the most, when you look at the things that are affecting the lives of Texans, right? How are we generating better energy, curing diseases, all of these things, financial systems, all this stuff, it's almost not comparable what you'll be able to do compared to the way we do things now. It'd be the equivalent of going back into the 30s and seeing, ledgers and written in thing and saying, oh yeah, by the way, now then there's going to be this blockchain thing or whatever, right? It's such a big leap, and I think that's part of the problem that legislators and others that are trying to govern it, not just in Texas, we've spoken around the world, in the Middle East and Europe and everywhere in Asia. Everybody is having a little bit of problem, getting their head around, okay, we've heard a lot of scientific promises, how do we know this one is real or whatever? This isn't something that's come out in the last few years. IBM was working on this technology in the 70s. The Chinese working on this technology, decades ago. Countries are investing billions of dollars. That real world impact, that is finding not drug discovery for better disease. It's eliminating disease. It's not better, utilization of battery power. It's completely new forms of power that can be discovered. You look at companies like General Fusion and others, and what they're trying to do and solve. These are the computers that have the horsepower they need to really explore those bleeding edge areas of physics and bring that into the reality of the world we live in today.
So there's a lot of conversation going on right now among folks like you, folks in this world, about how far off we are from like making kind of the major breakthrough that sort of changes the world in this. I mean, I hear people talk about 5 years. I hear people talk about 20 years. Various things. Your company is involved in this work. I mean, how far away do you think we are from the sort of life-changing developments that Hurley's talking about here?
Yeah, thank you. First, there is the saying that even the most optimistic of humans overshoot when you ask them what will happen in 1 year, and undershoot when you ask them what is going to happen in technology in 5 years. And the reason for that is, our brains do not think along exponential lines. They try to project linearly. The reality of the matter is that what is happening today is we are at the intersection of three key points. The first one is the question of is quantum real or not is not a question anymore. Everybody's asking how fast, not whether it will happen. It's been proven. And our machines are out there today in data centers. And if you look at them, it's about 8 tracks wide. So think about it as 8 refrigerators wide and 2 deep. And at the heart of these machines is a brain. And the brain looks something like that. It's the size of a credit card. It has atoms floating on top of it. And each atom represents a computing unit, and lasers are shooting at these atoms to conduct computations. So it's real. It exists in data centers. And the evolution and the speed, as I mentioned, doubling every 5 days, going to doubling every 1 day in terms of capacity. And this means that the breakthrough is going to come through one of two potential ways. One way is following the scale of these machines and using the same algorithms that we use today. The second, which was an eye-opening in 2017 for those following AI and machine learning, is a breakthrough in algorithm. Someone came up with a Gen AI algorithm. And this took the same existing processors that were used for gaming and other like GPUs, and then used them to create machine learning. And it was the start of an exponential growth. Hurley and others working on the software side of this industry have a big chance of finding algorithms that will change this industry. Us working on the hardware side, building better, faster computers, and by the way, connecting them to quantum networks, and we're the only company that has a lead in these two areas at the same time, are setting the stage on the hardware side. Our thinking is within the 2 to 3 years, we will see emerging pockets of quantum advantage in areas within industries that matter, and defense.
And the idea of quantum advantage is essentially I'm probably going to say this wrong, but this is my attempt to explain it. The size of the problem, right? Because as I mentioned more earlier, that there are a lot of things that you just frankly don't need a quantum computer for because today's technology can solve it, and the amount of kind of the technological capacity and the expense in order to do it intersect so that it basically makes sense and is successful for quantum to be kind of used by certain industries and companies. Did I say that right?
Yeah, it's basically maybe a simpler way to put it that's often put is it's the point where, pardon me, you can do something on a quantum computer that a classical computer can't.
Yeah, and maybe to build on what Hurley's saying, classical computers will stay there. So all quantum for the foreseeable future is going to be hybrid, which means you'll have algorithms running on both classical and quantum and supplementing each other to create something that classical cannot do alone.
Well, and to go back to what you said, you brought up a very important point. The reason that we see some governments and some states investing in quantum and others not is you hit the nail on the head. Is it 2 years away, or is it 20 years away, or is it 200 years away, right? The problem is that those arguments are very nuanced, meaning that if I say it's 2 years away, I'm correct. And if I say it's here today, I'm also correct. We use his machines with customers today. And if I say it's 20 years away, I am also correct. And the reason is that when it comes to quantum computing, there's, look, it's an existential threat to GPUs and other stuff, right? There's no doubt. And so you get people arguing from their point of view. And so if I'm, Jensen Huang at NVIDIA, I say, oh, it's 20 years away, because I'm thinking of, and he's not wrong, a general purpose quantum computer, and blah blah blah, and probably not that far away, as Philip pointed out. People tend to have bad estimates in either direction. But that makes sense. If Philip tells you it's here today, he'll sell you one. That's also correct, right? Into what the capacity of the machine is. It's unfair to be saying, oh, we don't know. If you look at the governments, look at the US and China, who are two of the biggest ones competing, and you look at what's coming out of them. In December, we were in a meeting where we were asked if there were specific machines on our platform, because those machines are seeing that they'll reach error correction or fault tolerance in the next 16 to 24 months. Okay, so that's a new level. I know you guys are way ahead on a lot of this and working on it. So this is a matter of perspective on how far it is. For me, as a software provider, I have no horse in the hardware game. I connect to dozens of different platforms. I have customers using them today. So when people say, well, oh, is it commercially viable? I would say yes. People pay me money to access quantum computers right now. So I'd say that's very commercially viable. They're selling systems. I'd say that is very commercially viable. So that's a really trick question, because you have to say, it's a difference between saying, there's a TI 99-4A and there's a Commodore 64 and there's a Windows laptop, Wintel laptop, and then an iPhone. And so people are saying, oh, it could be 20 years. Okay, they're thinking more of an iPhone, right? And they say 2 years, it's like, well, I got a TI 99-4A that works right now, right? So it's something that I think we really need to make sure people are aware of, especially from a legislative standpoint, because the fact is, we have to get in front of this on the funding and the legislation, because it's going to outpace. You're already seeing that with AI legislation around the world. It's going to be even faster.
Okay, so let's get into that. I mean, how does this apply to Texas? How does this apply to the Texas legislature? I know that you have mentioned a little bit about sort of the industries that Texas has possibly being key to the development of this, or being particularly benefited by the development of this. Just how does your company see Texas as a potential place for this work to be happening?
Yeah, so to first put this in numbers, and this doesn't come from my company, it comes from McKinsey. $1 to $2 trillion in annual economic growth expected to be generated because of quantum between 2030 and 2035. The Quantum Insider, a reputable research institution, 280,000 jobs to be generated by 2030 for quantum. And by the way, we're never going to have enough people to be able to do it. And platforms like the one that Hurley is putting together can enable you to take advantage of quantum with less people who are available to do that. The reality is, in order to go after these advantages, states and governments are investing around the world. Because these cycles of growth of new technologies, the implication, and that's a BCG study, is that if you are ahead of the cycle, you grab 90% of the value generated. Now, for Texas, that would mean 100 billion a year in economic growth and 30,000 jobs. So it's very significant. However, you cannot expect this to happen organically. In other words, if you wait to hit the drug that will solve some cancers, or to come up with an algorithm that's going to redefine finance, at this time, there will be an explosion in demand. However, when this happens, states who have already created an ecosystem, call them the Silicon Valleys of quantum, and there might be 3 in the US, there's not going to be 10, will be in the best position to reap this benefit. So waiting for the explosion in demand is, in a way, positioning yourself behind those who are investing today to reap this benefit. And we would love to see Texas being the state in the Midwest and potentially nationally. I live in Texas. I would like to see it nationally, taking the lead in this quantum revolution and in reaping the benefits.
What would an ecosystem entail here?
All the normal stuff. Obviously, we have a great university system here. You've got everything from UT and A&M to SMU and TCU and others and Texas State. Having all of them having coordinated programs would be a huge advantage. Obviously, we have industries. We have we have the military and aerospace stuff in San Antonio and Houston. We've got energy and finance in Houston and Dallas, right? So getting the businesses coordinating with this, and then also getting more companies. A lot of people know it. There's 9 quantum computing related companies in Austin, right? So we're already kind of peaking. I love what he said. I'd like to see us lead on the international stage, even further, even more ambitious, because you're going to hear Phil and I throughout this say a point that cannot be driven home enough. This isn't something where you see it explode and you go, let's do that now. Like, you are already years behind. When I first started this company almost 8 years ago, I thought I'd take software developers and make them quantum software developers, right? That's just something that's not possible, right? And so it requires, to be able to take advantage of, you need 3 to 5 years in it. And now we don't even have that as a state. Okay. We don't have it in development of the programs or getting the businesses in or doing any of that. And so if you look at the way our legislature works, right, we're meeting now, we'll skip a year and meet. By the time we meet again, right, this world will have changed in immeasurable ways. And so for Texas, it's more important to act fast, because this isn't something where you can say, okay, well, we'll come back and we'll look at it in 27 and we'll see how it is, because how it is there'll be a couple states dominating and it'll be different. I say that from the perspective of someone who is not originated from the quantum industry, right? So looking at it as an entrepreneur, looking at it objectively, having built a number of companies and sold them to Accenture and Goldman and everybody, I'm looking this, from a very entrepreneurial standpoint. I've now been in it long enough to be immersed in the community and know who all the players are and see everything and see the measurable progress, that I'm now worried I'm not going to grow my company fast enough to meet, the potential demand of this. And so this is something that is like, this is a moment in time we don't get back, right? We can never go, and we're already behind. You look at, when did Maryland start their program?
Years ago, and they
Like,
announced $1 billion investment.
Another billion, there's
couple
states,
weeks
there's
ago.
that's right. There's states already going. And as Philip said, I do believe there's room for 2 or 3. I agree with him on that. I want Texas to be the number one. And, it doesn't mean you have to go out and say, oh, okay, well, they've put $2 billion over the last 5 years, let's go match that or whatever. But we have to do something, and it has to be fairly significant and fairly major, because we have the university systems, we have the ecosystems of businesses, we have the software and development talent and the hardware talent. I mean, think about it. We had Intrinsity here that was acquired by Apple years ago, which is kind of responsible for the M chips. We've got AMD right in our backyard. Like, we have all of the things that you need to build the greatest quantum ecosystem on the planet. And that's not just state to state, but even bigger than some nations. But it's going to take action, and inaction doesn't put us a little behind. It just kills it completely.
So what does action look like?
So I'll tell you from our perspective. There are a number of things from an IonQ perspective. We would love first to have quantum computers from IonQ in the state of Texas. And why do you need quantum computers in the state of Texas? Over the past 12 months, we've crossed a very important line, which is you cannot simulate quantum computers anymore using classical computers. In the past, you could do it. You could, on your laptop, simulate a quantum computer at a very small scale. The scale is now not simulatable anymore, which means the only way you're going to be able to keep testing and pushing the limits is to have one or multiple quantum computers. We'd love to see Texas having the largest quantum network, which is a super secure, unbreakable net communications network that exists at scale in a state, not only to secure communications, but also to create solutions around these quantum networks and quantum computers. And Whurley is very much into the world of startups and the startup ecosystem. It's a vibrant part of the ecosystem in addition to large companies and universities. And those should be represented in this quantum. And so this is those two areas, in addition to contributing to a center of excellence in partnership with Strangeworks and Hurley, would be very concrete things that we can bring to the table. Beyond that, the state has to put the right incentives with universities to create programs, hire professors, fund labs, with startups to fund the acceleration of quantum startups, and perhaps with expanding quantum not only to the top universities, but community colleges, underserved communities, because then you create long-paying, high-quality jobs, and you bring people into a standard of living that's very hard to do otherwise.
So we're talking research. We're talking, is it training?
Yeah, I mean, research, training. Look, on the education front, when I first started in this industry, I used to joke I could count all of the people that mattered on my fingers and toes. Right now, they're in a small Excel spreadsheet. There's not a lot. There's not like 10,000 quantum computing ready physics professors that we could hire at universities. Right? There is such a, not only the moment in time we keep talking about, but more importantly, what are the resources available? It's going to be a highly competitive resource to get the people who can do the training, get the people who can do the education, to set up those programs. And that's why it's really, really important to move, cautiously as always, right? But expeditiously, with a plan on this is how we're going to get these universities connected in this quantum network Phil talked about, and this is who we need to hire and help them get to offset that, and here's how we need to do this. It's not like the internet. When the internet came out, there were tons of people that knew how networks worked, and TCP/IP was just this other, it wasn't a big deal to say, let's scale it up. Scaling quantum will be a big deal in the states and the nations. You see this again in the US-China competition on this front. The states and the nations that can put together the resources to pull that talent. If you're a professor right now in quantum physics, you can get a job in China overnight, right? They're actively trying to recruit people from the US, from Europe, from other places, pay them crazy salaries. There's not a lot of resource. There's not a lot of time, which means the only way you can do it is to build a well-funded program that is across the entire state, that has all of the attractors we need. Startups, again, big part of it, like you said, but let's get started with getting some quantum computers in the state where people can touch them, where people can know how to work on them, know how to repair them, know how to make sure that they're operating, where people can be programming them. Think of the TAC. I'd love to see a TAC here in Austin, but that's all quantum computers, right? That would be amazing. And it would put Texas at the forefront of what is the next thing. We love space, right? We've got, Elon down on the coast, and we've got, Armadillo and everybody else. A lot of those problems that they're going to start running into, a lot of the advancement of that field is going to need more compute power. It's going to need quantum computing. So no matter what industry you look at in the state, no matter where you look, and if you want to talk about building jobs and education and pulling people out of poverty, as Phil implied, and doing all of this stuff, this is the biggest opportunity this state will ever have to be able to have such a massive impact, not just on a technology, all the way back to that transistor day and kind of setting the stage, but in having that and maintaining that well into the future. Because the people that have it, when kind of the starting gun goes off, they're already at the end of the race by the time everybody starts. It is unbelievable the amount of different advances that happen. I mean, I spoke at a conference last year in Japan, and the year before I spoke, in that time there were hundreds of little advances in this. This space is starting to move so fast that, it's starting to be where I can't keep up with everything in it. I mean, we have a conversation. He's like, "Did you hear about that?" I'm like, "No, did you hear about this?" He's like, it's just moving so fast, and I don't want to see us left behind. And I don't have any intention of moving out of Texas, so we have to do it here.
Okay, so I mean, you mentioned what's going on in Maryland, a $1 billion investment. There was another some reporting recently about Illinois, Chicago in particular, investing, I think, $500 million in what seems to be sort of almost like a quantum industrial park, for lack of a better term, and everything like that. That is a lot of money. And we are in a state, we are a low tax state. We are a state with a lot of competing needs and priorities. There happens to be a lot of money available in the legislature this year, but there are also a lot of demands. I mean, we're talking about things like water. The state has very dire water needs right now. Even with the surplus we have, we're talking about right now being set aside about half of what some of the leading kind of water experts had been asking for. Education, the schools are struggling. You talk about preparing students to understand quantum. I mean, we're talking about things like trying to raise students' reading abilities up to grade level and things like that. I mean, what about sort of the argument of like we need to crawl before we walk on some of this stuff?
Look, there's nothing 100%, right? That there are other needs, that there are other things that are vitally important, right? We don't have, again, to match what some of these other states are doing. We have to do something, right? And so when you look at what's going on, you say, okay, well, we want to raise this and do that. Wonderful. Like, definitely, the water thing is a big issue here in the state. Power is another one, right? The education, absolutely. It doesn't mean that we can, not have some, finger in this pie, so to speak. I mean, this is a change. You think about artificial intelligence and the combination with quantum computing, and you think about the people who aren't working on that, they probably don't have jobs. So if you want to see Texas have a really strong economy, it's like, that's great. Let's get the resources to those kids. Let's get them to grade level. Let's get them stuff. Let's start teaching quantum computing as part of this program in middle school, right? Let's start teaching AI in middle school and high school and things, because there's literally going to be a displacement, the likes of which, we've never seen. And I say that, and it sounds like, doom and gloom. I am not from this industry. I've been a big AI critic for the majority of my career. These things are happening now, with or without us, on their own. And so we have to find a way to do all of that. But putting a stake in the ground, maybe it's not matching the $1 billion extra that Maryland did, right? Because they already did a bunch. Maybe it's not doing what Chicago did. Maybe we can work better, faster, and cheaper as a state if everybody's working together. But we have to do something, and we have to do something now.
I would concur with what Hurley has said. Think about quantum as an addition to what the needs are. We worked in Tennessee to secure their electric grid. Do we think we would benefit from securing ERCOT? Do we think quantum identifying that the grid is down somewhere fast enough to isolate it so that the rest of the grid doesn't go down could be helpful? Do we think that quantum sensors identifying cracks in water distribution, or quantum computers optimizing water distribution and reducing waste could be helpful? Do we think quantum infused in education could create better education? I think it's this infusion that we need to look at and think about it as an and versus as an or. And I would say we need to be bold in Texas. The fact that these other states are investing is because they want to attract the key companies and develop them that can then create an epicenter and the center of gravity to get the region going. This opportunity will disappear in 3 years. The most important companies will have already chosen the states where they can be. You asked how we would like to participate. We would like to bring IonQ into Texas in a way where we're working with Strangeworks and other companies, help create the center of gravity in Texas. But the time is now. In 2 years, I think the train will have left the station, and we cannot go with a half a measure. Let's do a few proof of concepts and a study and reconvene in 2 years. It'll be too late.
And look, this isn't the first time this has come up, right? About 5 years ago, some people tried to get some stuff started. Even a couple years ago, some people said, so it but our time has just been running out. And those things you mentioned, they're so important. But what's also important is making sure that Texas continues to have the economic viability, the presence on the world stage, those companies that gave us the surplus that we're talking about using, right? The fact is, I mean, he says 3. I don't even know if it'll be 3. I think there's going to be, when we were in Abu Dhabi in November, right? We were at an event together, and the head of Abu Dhabi said effectively the way they're looking at it and investing billions in it just themselves is that there's going to be the quantum nations and there's going to be everybody else, right? And they'd see it as a very, very distinct line of either you have it or you don't. And so, you think of how the internet provided so much economic, benefits, and you think about what AI is doing and all that. And again, you just multiply that and say, this is the new compute infrastructure of the future, and we can't afford to not be involved somehow.
So what's the reaction you get from Texas leaders when you try to make this pitch? I mean, do you feel like this message is being heard?
So 2 reactions. A large number doesn't know what we're talking about. It's like, quantum, is this something related to Bitcoin? I'm like, no, not exactly. But it could be dangerous though if we don't get ahead of it, because it can crack codes. The second reaction is, I think there is a culture of technology innovation that is growing in Texas. It's palpable. Yeah. When you talk to representatives like Representative Capriglione, his views on how technology can help grow Texas economy, Texas workforce, and others in the state, I think are gaining traction. And we really need the leadership of those in Texas who have the vision and have the ability to take bold moves in the direction of this vision. As I said, the cycles between innovations is shortening. Those on the front end of the cycle will reap most of the benefits. Those trying to catch up, it's going to take them a lot of investment and not get as many of the benefits. And so the third component, do we have the ecosystem? Yes, universities, startups, companies. Do we have the funding available? Yes. What is required is a bold move. And what is required is not to say, well, the market will take care of itself. If you wait for the market to take care of itself, it will happen, but you will be behind the curve, not ahead of it.
So there are technological issues that are really getting the attention in the legislature, AI, blockchain. I mean, we're going to be talking about some of those in future events. One thing I'm trying to wrap my head around is like, how much of this is, we're talking about massively powerful computers. How much of this is just speeding up the developments in those fields, or how much of this is just like a completely different world and game changer where it could maybe blow some of these other things, sort of leave some of these other things we're talking about in the dust.
I mean, it will, right? Like, first of all, blockchain, which I've always said, and I apologize, never been a fan, right? We don't have transparent ledgers for a reason, and the energy it uses is insane. And if I would have come to you as a CEO 12 years ago, 15 years ago, and said, hey, I was on the dark web last night and I had a few too many drinks or whatever, and I found this anonymous white paper, we should debase everything on this, you'd be like, you're fired. But Silicon Valley put some money into it, and now it's a thing. The underlying encryption of that will be threatened by quantum computing. So think of a quantum computer breaking the encryption on the blockchain, and think of that, just the economic impact of that alone, right? It's phenomenal, right? You talk about AI, the first superintelligence will probably be a quantum superintelligence, okay? You see how much power, how much machine resources being used by AI. Now we're building data centers with power plants, nuclear power plants beside them, just so we can have enough. Quantum computers are going to be something that are going to dramatically affect both of those things. I mean, you're talking about, you know, horses in a world of planes or spaceships, right? And it's like, it's great that we're investing in silicon here in the state. I appreciate it. But that's like, we have just built a massive stable and we've now got 30,000 horses. And it's like, right, but cars are coming and planes are coming and space travel is going to be coming, right? It's cannot be compared, like the amazing impact it will have. And I've been in my career in technology for 30 years. I worked in Apple R&D, I worked in IBM and did all of these things. I have never in my career had that moment where I'm like, whoa, like what am I involved in? Like keeping me up at night. How am I moving fast enough? How am I learning fast enough? How am I doing this? 30 years and I've had some amazing success. I've never felt pressure. I've always just kind of like, yeah, it's cool. Like did a company, sold to Goldman, whatever. This is the first time I felt not just this immense pressure to be ahead of this and to be evangelizing this, but also this responsibility about, like, I look at my 7-year-old and my 9-year-old and I think this is a technology that they will take for granted when they're, you know, in their 20s, and everything changes. Take the time between 1959 and now, right? Invention of the integrated circuit until now, compress that time down to between now and 2030 or 2035. That's what we're talking about. And it is insane. And as an objective as I've been as an entrepreneur to be successful, and as adverse to risk as I've been, even though everybody sees entrepreneurs as very risky, it's really about managing risk. I cannot wrap my head around the unforeseeable impacts of this technology. And we live in the greatest time to be alive in the history of our species in this technical evolution. And we need our state and our people to be the ones benefiting the most from it.
Yeah, and I'd like to add one word on the energy. The machine that I described to you runs on less energy than my 2 air conditioners at home. There is
I really thought you were going to say hairdryer.
I stopped using those a while ago.
I know.
But and the reason, like, there is when we talk about conventional compute, we're talking about megawatt, gigawatt data centers instead of kilowatts. It's a factor of 1,000 or 1,000,000 times more energy efficient. This is a really important thing because there is not enough energy to grow our compute as much as we want using the traditional path. And it's not that the rest will disappear, but you will be able to do so much more with less.
Okay, so you mentioned you know, things that keep you up at night. I mean, I think there's a lot of talk out there in the world about the dangers of AI, the potential downsides of this. And now we're up here talking about something that is vastly more powerful than even that. I mean, you mentioned again there's a wide expectation that, you know, quantum computers will essentially just be able to, you know, break encryption just, you know, very quickly, easily. There's all different kinds of cyber technologies. You know, how, you know, even like maybe sentient can you make these this technology? Help me understand how concerned I should be about just the power of this technology's impact on society.
Well, I think the AI stuff, I don't agree with a lot of the doomsdayers in AI. Okay. I was invited by the Pope to the Vatican in November of 23 for a summit on kind of quantum and AI stuff. And there's a talk online if you want to check it out where I said, look, you know, it's not going to kill us like the Terminator. Why would it? It would just poison the water supply over 200 years because it doesn't care about time. And then we just die out as a species and be like an heir at a great planet. There's so many other ways.
You for making me feel better.
There's so many other ways to look at it. And I get it because people that make that argument are about, well, if agents are given a task, they'll do whatever they can, including to cheat to do that task. Like I totally get those arguments. This isn't something. What keeps me up at night isn't, you know, dangers of quantum computer encryption being broken. Let's talk about the encryption. So AI stuff, little bit overblown concern. Putting people out of jobs, huge concern. We should be very, very, very focused on that. Creating a new class system of those who have access to AI and those don't, very concerned about that. There's real world concerns, but it's not the Terminator, right? When it comes to security, making it take a long time and a lot of resource, right, to secure it, it seems like kind of a pretty dumb way to secure things in to begin with. And so what keeps me up at night are the transition points, kind of, of where we're going, because the future is there won't be software applications, right? The software will be written by an AI in real time for your need, and then it will be deleted. And so security as a model will change dramatically, like we're not even thinking about today. What keeps me up at night is, I did function blood tests this year. I'm taking all my healthcare. All of us have plastics in our blood. Go get a blood test, guarantee. You have 3 or 4, 5, 8, 10 types. What does that do to our children? What does that do to their health? What does that do? Having these machines, the sooner we have these machines, the sooner we start solving real big problems like that. So things that keep me up at night aren't scary things. They're two things. There's in the category of, critical things, like, making sure all the water stuff is optimized, that we have power, that we can do the healthcare stuff. And then opportunistic things, which are like new inventions. Think of everything that's been invented because of compute power, right? And all of a sudden you're like, so many things that we just don't even think about, right? Like you talked about the magic phone in your pocket. We take it for granted. We have no idea that if you took that and you just went back 20 years, how revolutionary. If you went back 50 years, right? If you went back like 80, 100 years, you'd be like a wizard, right? Like it's amazing, and all that's happening. So what keeps me up at night is the fact that we're not moving fast enough on either front. I'm not moving fast enough as an entrepreneur. We're not moving fast enough as a state. We're not moving fast enough as a country in a race where you see tens of billions of dollars being invested by other governments that may not have America or Texas' best interest in mind, right? So like making sure we're ahead of it, that is goal number one. It's not scary stuff that keeps me up at night. The only thing that scares me is we miss the boat, because there's not another boat coming. Like we missed this train, we missed this flight. There's not another Southwest flight for us to jump on. We're just done.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And adding on what Whurley said, when I think about quantum and many of the advanced technologies, the risks are similar, but there are also some rewards. So let me give you a few examples. If you think about what threatens us as a humanity, maybe extreme weather changes. Quantum can help model the weather in ways that we cannot today. Extreme epidemics, we can model epidemics in ways that we cannot, and maybe find new drugs. So we're even cybersecurity, a proven antidote that cannot be broken because of the laws of physics, is quantum communications. Because if somebody eavesdrop, the communication will break, the entanglement will fold, and you will know, and we'll have to restart. But there is also ethical element to it. And one of the senators recently asked me, aren't we pushing the limits of what we humans should be controlling too far? Are we going beyond what God intended? And my answer is, the other alternative, which is we're not going to do it, will not stop progress. The only way to deal with this is to put the most ethical people and the most ethical states at the forefront of this technology, so that we're not leaving something that has a strong positive or negative potential in the hands of people who might use it negatively. And so I think we don't have the choice to say progress and quantum is not going to have. The choice that we have is, how do we extract the most value out of it, create the most jobs for the people around us, and protect ourselves from dangers from the outside.
Okay, so we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to ask a very quick question, but one I always like to ask folks, which is sort of the magic wand question. And I'm going to specifically put this toward, the state and the state investment in this. If you had a magic wand, could make the Texas legislature, the Capitol, do one thing in this realm, what would you what would you use it? What would you ask them to do with that one?
I would go for a bold move this cycle to the tunes that we have seen in other states like Maryland, the $1 billion, and directed at the education sector, the enablers of the infrastructure, software and hardware, and the ecosystem of enterprises and startups, and send a message to the nation and perhaps to the world that Texas is serious about quantum and Texas is taking this hill.
What about you?
All of that, plus, again, I know it sounds like a joke when I say it, but I wrote Quantum Computing for Babies, and then I wrote Dummies. I'm writing them in reverse order for a reason, and that's because, I mean, I'm teaching my kids about quantum stuff. I think, everything he said, plus on that education system, driving these more complicated topics further down in the school system. I have had the benefit of speaking at probably about 20 elementary schools in the state about this. And what's great about kids at that age is they don't have any limits in their mind. And if you expose them to this early and often, if that was part of the program on top of what he's saying, you're building the most robust workforce, the most robust society for this new world. And so, we need to make the investment. We need to make it now. It needs to be managed properly. Put together whatever board the governor needs, or some form of governance. Make rules so you're not just handing out money willy-nilly. I don't think anybody's saying that. But put a stake in the ground and say, we're going to invest this, and we're going to invest it by this time or over this period of time. But make sure it just permeates throughout our ecosystem in Texas. And again, even down into, at least middle school would be a big request from me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much both for being here. And thanks to our group here as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.